Play different.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pararena!
Pararena is a unique sci-fi sports game from James Calhoun, who is most known for the Glider series. In it, the player slides around a bowl-shaped parabolic arena and tries to kick or pick up and throw a ball into a goal, while preventing a computer opponent from scoring in the opposite goal. The main attraction is the physics. Players use the mouse to add force to their character in different directions, but the amount of force added depends on their current moving direction and velocity, plus the angle of the dish. For a simple example, if you're sliding down from the left side towards the right, moving back up towards the left would prove to be difficult because your velocity is already pushing you towards the right. On the other hand, if instead you slid your mouse to the right, it would just add to your current velocity and send you flying up the right side of the arena. But sliding around is easier said than done because the opponent can slam into you, sending you flying around depending on the angle and speed they hit you, and you can do the same to them. In fact, slamming into them so that they fall off the edge is an important strategy for reasons I'll get to soon. Oh, and you'll want to avoid falling off the edge by accident. Further adding to the challenge is the fact that the ball matches your velocity when you throw it. So while it's harder to aim when moving at high speeds, the ball has an actual chance of reaching the goal. If you move too slowly, it's very likely that the ball will just roll right back down the bowl without even getting near the goal. Any movie buffs watching may get vibes from the 1975 cult film Rollerball when the ball shoots out onto the field. This is because it's a movie that Calhoun loves, and he says it was definitely an influence. But, as with Glider, this project actually started as a tech demo in search of a game. Originally, he just wanted to see if he could simulate a ball rolling around a dish. This then evolved into having several balls rolling around, then being able to apply force to one of those balls to collide with the others. Then that ball turned into a player, and the game evolved from there. The work involved in simulating the physics required some clever programming, especially to have it all running as quickly as it does. I won't go into all the nitty-gritty, but it involves having the dish being pre-rendered, then having a table full of all the possible positions of the ball. So instead of doing complex computations on the fly to find out where to draw the ball, it was all pre-calculated and could be quickly looked up. Similar tricks were used to simulate the force being applied on the ball, so really, it's a bit like smoke and mirrors, but it works incredibly well in practice. But enough technical talk, how does it actually play? There are multiple game types with different win conditions, but they basically all boil down to whoever has the highest score at a certain point will win the game. There are 4 opponents, each with their own characteristics to deal with, but the real challenge is simply mastering the controls. Put frankly, it's hard, and it was the most common complaint Calhoun received from testers. It's a tough game to master, especially when you also have to deal with another player slamming into you. It doesn't help that if you fall off the dish while carrying the ball, you get a foul, which is why I mentioned earlier that knocking the other player off the edge is an important skill, because it will foul them out if they're holding the ball. Having said all that, once you do improve and start to take control of the arena, it feels incredibly satisfying, partly due to the difficulty of mastering it, I'm sure, but also because it just feels good sliding around, dodging the other player, and slamming the ball into the goal. Oh, and don't worry, there are practice modes where you don't have another player hassling you. It's also without a doubt one of the more unique and speedier games you can install on Black and White Macs.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pararena!
As with Glider, Cassidy and Green approached Calhoun to release a commercial version of Pararena, which became Pararena 2.0. This came out in 1992 2 years after the shareware original. 2.0, displayed in glorious 16 colours, ran at a higher resolution allowing a larger playfield, the physics engine was more sophisticated, and overall it just runs a lot more smoothly than the original release. The controls are also much more precise as it's no longer restricted by 8-way movement, and crouching can help give players a little speed boost. New computer opponents were added for a total of 6, and as in the original, each with their own different traits and AI personality, which was inspired by Shufflepuck Cafe. For example, here you can see me play against Heavy Otto, who weighs quite a bit more than me, which makes pushing him out of the arena quite more difficult than with others. But on the plus side, he's also quite slow. Another big addition was network play, an important feature for a competitive game of this nature, and it was Calhoun's first experience implementing such technology. Other changes include that there is no longer an option to automatically pick up the ball, it's no longer possible to change the speed of the game, you can no longer mess with the physics, and there are fewer scoring modes. It may sound like a lot was removed, but this is because Pararena 2.0 is built around the mechanics and options which Calhoun himself felt suited the game best. There are also different league levels. Your goal starts out quite large in the lowest league, but it gets increasingly smaller with each higher one. The computer player's goal is always the smallest available, giving you the advantage in all but the highest league. However, if you don't want to just play a random game and instead actually win trophies, which is how progress is measured in the game, you'll need to play in the top league in order to enter tournament mode. Different trophies are awarded depending on how well you do after playing against all the opponents. In a non-tournament game, the winner is the first to 11 in addition to exceeding the other player's score by 2 points, and in tournament mode, it's the first to 17 in addition to exceeding the other player's score by 3 points. In a standard game, if a player exceeds their opponent's score by 5 points, it's an automatic win, and the same happens in a tournament game if they exceed the score by 7 points. Personally, I preferred the timed matches found in the original Pararena, since here games can drag on for too long with constant back and forth. So it's basically a super polished version of the original shareware game, and this is exactly why Calhoun believes it wasn't as big a success as he and the publishers were hoping. He says he concentrated too much on presentation, like the extra commentary, stadium ambiance, and the instant replays, instead of making the game itself more interesting, because in the end, he thinks it was too simple despite how hard it is to master. Some ideas he threw around while we were talking were bonus rounds, multi-ball rounds, and lightning rounds. Some ideas off the top of my head include power-ups, moving obstacles, and just a more involving single-player mode. The game is just missing something, he says, but he didn't realize it at the time. And I somewhat agree. It's definitely a satisfying game to master and a very solid title, but it does lack something to really hook you in and constantly bring you back, especially for a commercial release. Still, I consider it to be one of the most unique and interesting games on the Mac, especially in the sports category, and it's one that's definitely very enjoyable and still more than worth trying today, even if it lacks a bit of longevity. In 2016, Calhoun made the game open source. It's also been ported to the RetroWeb Vintage Museum, allowing people to play it with folks over the internet. And that's the story of Pararena, a unique, futuristic sports game on the Macintosh.